What if the protectors themselves were haunted by the unknown? Picture the bravest souls encountering chilling apparitions and inexplicable phenomena. Imagine an officer responding to a call about a vanishing vehicle, a car that seemed to blink out of existence right before his eyes. As he searched the area, a desperate voice echoed through the darkness, yet no one was there. These are just glimpses into the spine-chilling tales of police officers confronting the supernatural. Stories of ghostly screams, terrifying encounters, and paranormal activity that defies all logic. Officer Sarah was used to the quiet nights, patrolling the empty roads of a rural town. One night, her silence was shattered by a blood-curdling scream emanating from an abandoned hotel. The sound pierced through the stillness, slicing through the tension that usually blanketed the small town after dark. Her heart raced as she instinctively tightened her grip on the flashlight, its weak beam flickering, threatening to die at the most inopportune moment. With each cautious step closer to the hotel, Inez crawled up her spine. The locals whispered of eerie happenings. Within those crumbling walls, phantom shadows darting through the windows, soft whispers mingling with the wind. And now this horrific scream. Was it a warning, a call for help, or something far more sinister? Sarah felt the night closing in as darkness swallowed her surroundings, amplifying every little sound. The crack of twigs, the rustle of leaves. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she pressed on, propelled by a mix of duty and an unshakable curiosity. The moment she crossed the threshold, a sense of dread washed over her. The air grew thick as she shone her light into the shadows, revealing paling wallpaper and dust-laden furnishings frozen in time. As she stepped deeper, the creaking floorboards echoed like a countdown to something inevitable. From the depths of the hotel, footsteps began to echo, slow, deliberate, ghostly. She stopped, her breath hitching as the sound reverberated through the long-locked hallways, each footstep a reminder that she was far from alone in this forsaken place. Sarah's heart pounded, each beat resonating with the primal fear that clawed at her throat. She recalled the whispers of the townsfolk, the tales of lost souls unable to escape the past, the haunting shadow of something that once thrived within these walls. As she edged down the dimly lit corridor, a foreboding chill swept through the air and seemed to wrap around her, drawing her to a particular room at the end of the hall. As she entered the room, the temperature plummeted, sending a jolt of ice through her veins. Instinctively, she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The flashlight flickered as if even its light sensed the malevolence that lingered here. Suddenly, without warning, the door behind her slammed shut. A visceral panic surged through her. She spun around, the room's silence now breached by her erratic breathing. There, painted against the peeling wallpaper, ghostly shapes twisted and contorted, figures of despair trapped in a visual nightmare. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to escape, but her feet felt glued to the floor, paralyzed by terror. Just as she gathered the strength to dash for the door, a harrowing sight made her blood run cold. In the ornate mirror across the room, a figure stood, silent, still, and watching. It mirrored her every move, its face obscured in shadow, yet a grotesque, sinister grin stretched unnaturally across its features. The figure raised a hand, and so did she, their motions synchronized, each mimicry bringing forth a new wave of dread. The smile widened, a mocking reflection of her fear, and a whisper danced through the air, chilling her to the bone. It felt as if the very essence of the room conspired against her, the walls breathing with an unsettling malevolence. In terror, she tore her gaze away and lunged for the door, adrenaline propelling her forward. With all her might, she pushed against the heavy wood, the door creaking ominously as it surrendered to her desperate escape. She fled down the hallway, the stomping echoes of her own heart almost drowned out by the mocking laughter that chased her through the shadows. Ra finally burst outside into the cool night air, collapsing against her squad car, gasping for breath. Relief flooded her veins, washing away the grip of fear. But even as she gathered herself, a gnawing question there, was it real? The next day she returned to the hotel, her nerves on edge. As she approached the entrance, she noted with grim disbelief that the doors remained steadfastly locked, just as she had left them. A shiver ran down her spine as the sun struggled to pierce through the oppressive dark, leaving her haunted by the unsettling thought. What had she truly experienced that night? What had dwelled behind those locked doors, forever shrouded in mystery? Officer Mike had always craved the thrill of the chase, the rumble of adrenaline igniting his senses at the mere thought of pursuing a suspect. One fateful night, with anticipation thrumming in his chest, he received a call that promised excitement. Reports of a rogue car speeding recklessly through town. Little did he know, this night would unravel into a terrifying encounter he could never have prepared for. As he sped down the empty streets, his eyes caught sight of the car. Its taillights glowed with an otherworldly hue, painting the asphalt in a sinister red. Mike's heart raced as he pressed his foot down harder on the accelerator, the sirens wailing like banshees in the night. The chase intensified. The feeling of power surged through him. But then, an unexpected twist. The car veered sharply into a dead-end alley. Followed, his mind racing with doubts. The alley loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, the typical backdrop for a police chase turning into something more unsettling. As he reached the alley's end, his headlights flickered over the ground, illuminating the grim truth. The car was gone, just vanished. Panic began to creep in, clawing at the edges of his reason. He shifted his patrol car into reverse, scanning every exit, every shadow that flickered in the periphery. Nothing, just the silence of the night echoing back at him, mocking his sense of normalcy. He exited the vehicle, straining his ears for any sound, any sign of movement. Yet the stillness enveloped him like a shroud. As he surveyed the asphalt, his flashlight caught something. Tire tracks, fresh and deep, until they abruptly ended in the air. How could this be? The questions spiraled in his mind, pushing him to the edge of disbelief. The tracks led to an uncanny point where reality seemed to fray. It was as if the car had simply drifted into another dimension, leaving behind only whispered tales of confusion and terror. Then came the moment that would etch itself into the recesses of his mind. Reviewing the dashcam footage later, Mike's heart plummeted. A shadowy figure flitted across the screen, fleeting but distinct, lingering just long enough to instill a chill within him. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It was something otherworldly. Each playback only intensified his dread. An answer that felt like an accusation against his sanity. Days turned into weeks, each successive shift haunted by thoughts of that eerie chase. In the quiet solitude of his patrol car, he found himself glancing nervously into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ghostly taillights looming behind him again. The streaks of unnatural red became a specter of dread, a reminder of the unfathomable mysteries lurking beneath the surface of his everyday encounters. When the investigation wrapped up, Mike learned he was far from alone in this experience. Multiple witnesses had reported sightings of the same ghostly vehicle vanishing over the years, stories dismissed and swept under the rug of reality, an unresolved enigma, a chilling reminder of how thin the veil can be between this world and the next. From that night forth, Officer Mike approached his shifts with newfound caution, a lingering awareness of the spectral threads that tethered the mundane to the inexplicable. As he drove the familiar streets, every shadow and every flicker of movement made him question what lay beyond the flickering streetlights. The thrill of the chase had morphed into an unsettling attachment to a truth that felt both visceral and surreal. A ghost vehicle, a paranormal phenomenon, a haunting he could never truly escape. For Sir Emily was the calm, composed type who navigated tense situations with ease. Yet one stormy night, her routine patrol led her to an inexplicable encounter in the park that would haunt her forever. Wind howled, and the rain poured down in sheets as Emily drove through the desolate park, her headlights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, a child's laughter echoed, a sound out of place amidst the storm's fury. She paused, the laughter sending chills down her spine. Who could be out here in such weather? Compelled by an uneasy mix of curiosity and dread, Emily stepped out of her car, the rain drenching her uniform. She moved cautiously toward the sound, her senses heightened. Each step felt heavy, and each creak of the playground equipment made her heart race. As she approached, something caught her eye, an old swing, moving back and forth, eerily rhythmic, despite the shelter overhead blocking the wind. Breath hitched as she focused on the swing, her mind racing with questions. Why was it moving? Who was here? The laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that pressed in on her from all sides. And then she saw her, a little girl in a white dress, standing motionless under a tree. The flashlight beam from her duty belt flickered nervously, catching the girl just before she vanished into the dark. "Ma'am?" Emily called out, straining to keep her voice steady. But there was no answer. Just the shrill wind and the pattering rain. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the park for brief moments. In those flashes, the girl appeared closer, her eyes hollow and her face expressionless. A palpable sense of dread clawed at Emily's chest as she instinctively stepped back. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was not just a figment of her imagination. As the storm raged on, she began to hear whispers, faint yet unmistakable. The words wrapped around her like a cold fog, speaking of past traumas linked to this very ground. Emily's mind raced with memories of news reports, stories of a child who had gone missing, never found, and the sorrow that pooled in the hearts of those who sought answers. With each lightning flash, the girl drew closer, her features becoming clearer, yet more unsettling. Caught in the grips of fear and fascination, Emily felt compelled to stay. And then, with the thunder roaring like a beast above, the apparition stood right before her, its lips parting to whisper, "Help me." The words hung in the air, heavy and poignant. Before Emily could respond, the girl dissolved into the storm as if swept away by the wind. Standing alone in the tempest, the echoes of her plea remained etched in Emily's mind. Deeply shaken, Emily returned to her patrol car, her hands trembling on the wheel. In the days that followed, she couldn't escape the grip of that night. Driven by a need to understand, she dug into historical records, unearthing tales of other sightings and tragedies tied to the park. Each revelation led her deeper into a web of sorrow that had never truly faded. The unresolved mystery shadowed Emily, a constant reminder that some spirits wander endlessly, seeking solace in this world. A chilling reminder that the unseen can brush too closely against our reality. Officer Pete thought it was just another routine call. Late at night, he was dispatched to a suburban home in a peaceful neighborhood where trouble rarely stirred. But as he pulled up, a shiver crept down his spine. The house loomed before him, cloaked in darkness, its windows black and lifeless. The eerie silence shattered the peace that usually enveloped the street. Stepping from his car, Pete felt an unsettling chill in the air, a stark contrast to the usual warm summer nights. He approached the front door, glancing down at his radio, which crackled with static, the dispatcher's voice momentarily lost in the void. Out of habit, he knocked, announcing himself before cautiously pushing the door open. The hinges creaked, echoing through the stillness. "Hello," he called, stepping into the home. Inside, he was met by an unsettling quiet, the kind that gnawed at the edges of his mind. The living room was untouched, pristine, as if everyone had just left for an evening stroll. Yet a creeping coldness enveloped him, sinking into his bones. He glanced down the hallway, apprehensive, the shadows stretching and contorting as if alive. That's when he saw them. The family huddled together, their faces pale and haunted, eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. "What's going on here?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure, despite the icy grip of anxiety tightening around his chest. We've been hearing things," the father stammered, gesturing towards the basement. "Things moving, voices. It won't stop." Pete nodded, instincts kicking in. "Show me." The family led him to the basement door, dread hanging thick in the air like fog. He could feel their fear, a palpable force that hung between them, urging him to retreat. But he was a police officer. He had to face this head-on. As he descended the stairs, the beam of his flashlight danced against the walls, illuminating a space filled with shadows and clutter. A flicker of doubt clouded his mind. The basement felt wrong, like a cavern of secrets waiting to be unveiled. The cold grew more intense, sending a chill that prickled along his skin. He scanned the area, searching for any signs of a disturbance. Oddly enough, nothing appeared amiss. Just then, the light dimmed, and the beam flickered erratically, darkness creeping in like an unwelcome guest. A shudder ran through him as something slithered in the periphery of his vision. Shadows moved, not just cast by the flickering flashlight, but alive, growing with sinister intent. His heart raced as he turned, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. And then he saw it, a figure shrouded in darkness, its presence suffocating. It lingered in the corner, eyes glinting with malice that pierced the darkness. Time seemed to freeze. As the air thickened, wrapping around him like a vice, the entity rushed at him, swift and malevolent. In an instinctive reaction, Pete raised his gun, heart pounding in his ears. But before he could pull the trigger, it vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a suffocating emptiness. Breathing heavily, he returned to the family, their eyes wide with terror, each person clinging to one another. Pete's encounter became the nucleus of whispers in the community. Subsequent investigations revealed a grim history. Previous owners had experienced unspeakable hauntings, each reporting similar sensations. It became clear that their house was a battleground between the living and an ancient malevolence. Haunted by the entity's sheer wickedness, the family fled, seeking safety elsewhere. And Officer Pete, left with a lingering chill that clung to his skin, couldn't shake the feeling that he had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. There are stories shared among seasoned officers, tales of urban legends that flutter like moths to the flame of curiosity. Officer John had always dismissed them until one fateful night at the old bridge on the outskirts of town. Reports of ghostly apparitions began trickling in, each more chilling than the last. Intrigued and perhaps a bit skeptical, John decided to embark on a solo investigation. As he approached the bridge, a thick veil of fog enveloped him, obscuring his vision and transforming the familiar path into a shadowy maze. The moonlight illuminated faint, shadowy figures that danced upon the bridge, teasing the edges of his belief with every fleeting movement. With each step, the atmosphere around him thickened. Something was watching. Footsteps echoed behind him. He was certain he was alone. The whispers, incoherent yet haunting, rode the wind, sending chills coursing through his spine. It was as if the very air was alive, filled with secrets that clawed at the edges of his mind. As John ventured further onto the bridge, the fog thinned suddenly, parting like heavy curtains, and for a moment he caught his breath. Before him stood a woman in a flowing dress, her form both ethereal and tangible, wrapped in the eerie glow of the moon. But it was her face, or the lack of it, that froze him in place. Eyeless sockets stared into his soul, pulling at something deep and primal within him. Then the moment stretched thin. An unearthly wail erupted from the depths of her being, a sound that resonated through his very core, rattling his bones with a profound dread. In the blink of an eye, she lunged forward, and instinct kicked in. John staggered back, heart racing as he fought to keep his balance, the edge of the bridge looming perilously close. The dark waters of the river below beckoned him with sinister whispers. Miraculously, he regained his footing, the spectral form vanishing as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the unsettling silence behind. The encounter left him shaken, a skeptic no more. Years later, John learned the legend, a story of the woman who had perished at the bridge, her spirit bound to the very stones that once held her. Her cries were said to echo in the night air, a reminder of unfinished business. This experience had transformed his understanding of the supernatural, opening his eyes to the echoes of the past that lingered in the present, where reality collided with the mysteries of the unknown. These chilling reminders urge us to remember that the veil between reality and the unknown is perilously thin. Even those sworn to protect us aren't immune to the world's unexplained horrors. Stay vigilant, for you never know when the uncanny might intertwine with your life. The real horror lies in the moments when the screen fades to black, leaving you with the lingering question, What lurks just beyond the shadows? Embrace the mysteries and the fear of the unknown, and dare to dive deeper into these engaging tales. In the stillness of a quiet town, a police officer named Mark faced an eerie situation that would haunt him forever. One evening, after a routine patrol, Mark received a call about a disturbance at an old abandoned house. The locals often spoke of strange sounds and flickering lights, but most dismissed it as mere folklore. Yet something in his gut told Mark this was more than just another ghost story. As he approached the dilapidated porch, an unsettling chill crept over him. The air was thick, charged with an unexplainable energy that fluttered in his chest. He stepped inside, flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and shattered windows. Shadows seemed to quiver just beyond the reach of his light, and he could almost hear them whispering, taunting him to venture deeper. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back room, sending a jolt through Mark's body. With his heart pounding, he moved cautiously toward the sound, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. What awaited him inside was something not of this world. An old rocking chair swayed gently in the corner, despite the absence of any breeze, creaking as though something or someone had just been occupying it. Mark's breath quickened, the weight of his badge suddenly feeling like a burden. As he stepped closer, the temperature dropped sharply. The very walls of the house seemed to breathe, and in that moment, he felt a presence, a force that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Flickering shadows coalesced into vague shapes, twisting into horrific forms that danced just beyond the edge of his vision. Voice, barely above a whisper, suddenly filled the room. "Help me." It was a raspy plea, drenched in despair. Mark's stomach churned. He wasn't there to respond to any cries for help. He was the authority, yet he felt the grip of fear tighten around his throat. A bead of sweat trickled down his spine as he fought the urge to flee. The surge of courage, he called out, "Is anyone there?" The only response was an oppressive silence, broken only by the continued creaking of the chair. Just when he thought he'd lost control, a figure materialized. A woman dressed in tattered, ghostly remnants of a bygone era. Her eyes, hollow and pleading, bore into his soul, and for a brief instant, Mark glimpsed the pain woven through her spectral form. Instinctively, he reached for his radio, but a jarring static filled the air, rendering him unable to communicate. The room swelled with palpable darkness, and the shadows morphed, drawing closer, engulfing him in a shroud of uncertainty and dread. He felt paralyzed, trapped between worlds, one comforting, the other nightmarish. "Get out!" She finally spoke, her voice shattering the silence and echoing through the walls. Driven by sheer adrenaline, Mark stumbled back, racing through the darkness toward the exit, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, a cacophony of whispers crescendoed, lingering like a haunting melody, urging him to stay, to help. Sting into the moonlit night, Mark gasped for breath, the chill of the air grounding him in reality. As he glanced back at the house, it loomed ominously, a predator lying in wait, its horrors now firmly etched in his mind. He knew he could never forget what he had encountered within those crumbling walls. Cops protect us from the unknown, but what happens when they themselves become entangled in a web of supernatural terror? Mark's story is just one of many chilling encounters faced by those who dare to confront the unspeakable.